What's up everybody? This is supposed to be our office. And as you can tell, it needs a little work. That's why today we're going to be building this computer desk and hanging bookshelf. Originally this wasn't the design we were going with in our newly added office, but I thought of this design last weekend, drew a rough draft on a yellow notepad and got to work. Yes, a yellow notepad. Don't make fun of my drawing skills. So let's go ahead and get started on another episode of Average Joe's DIY. So the first thing I did was measure out all my pieces, mark them, and cut them. The width of my desk is going to be 77 inches because that is the measurement in my office from wall to wall. Now as I am cutting these boards, I wanted to let you know that all of my tools and products used in this video are linked in the description below. So if you have any questions, be sure and go and check it out. Now that the 2x12s are cut, we can move on to the 2x4s. Now I cut a small bevel on one side of the 2x4s just to give it a little bit of character. And then I did a mock-up of the desk to make sure all the pieces looked good. Now of course this is the desk upside down. Then we move on to sanding everything. Now I prefer to sand all the pieces before putting anything together. It just makes things easier versus having to sand in tight corners after all of it's put together. Now I don't have a planer to run these boards through to get the grain smooth, therefore I use 60 grit sandpaper to smooth out all the grain ridges. And I also don't have a router, and I wanted this front edge to be slightly rounded, so again I used 60 grit sandpaper and I rounded it with the sander. Now I'll come back later and sand with 220 grit before I put on the polyurethane. Now that everything is sanded and wiped down with a damp cloth, it's time to install. Make sure to mark where your studs are beforehand so that you know where to install your screws on your 2x4s. I always recommend using a level when it comes to a desk or a shelf because walls, floors, and ceilings aren't always square or even. So this process is pretty simple. Measure and mark the height you want your 2x4s to be, and when installing them, just make sure that they're level all the way around. Now I put the top of my 2x4s at 28.5 inches so that when I install my 2x12s on top, the computer desk will be about 30 inches tall, which is about the general height of a computer desk. Now that I have my 2x4s secured to the wall, it's time to install the 2x12s. This first one fit like a glove, but the second board was a little too tight. Kind of like that guy at the gym who wears his little brother's t-shirts. So I needed to trim a little bit off of the edge. Now let's try this again. Alright, now that both boards are on, it's time to secure them to the 2x4s. But when I tried to secure them, this happened. There was a storm coming and yes, the power had to go out. But thankfully, our power never stays out very long at our house, so I just kept working. And then, like always, the power came back on. Now, I didn't want to have screw holes showing on the top of the desk, therefore I mounted them by installing the screws from underneath. And then I cut a 2-inch hole and installed the desk grommet for my cables to run through to the receptacle underneath the desk. I then installed these 1x strips straddling the seam of the 2x12s to make sure that they were secure and in line with each other. Now I could have mounted these two boards together, making a seamless desktop, but my wife liked the look of the two separate boards, and you know what they say, happy wife, happy life. Therefore, it stayed two separate boards. Now I need to clean up my mess in the house before I get in trouble. I vacuumed all the sawdust and wiped it again with a damp cloth. So far we have a computer desk. Now to start working on the bookshelf. Since I don't have drawing plans for this bookshelf except for my amazingly detailed yellow notepad drawing, I need to measure out everything and try to figure out how I want it to look. I can see the design in my head, but it's like my wife always tells me, it's all in your head, Joe. Haha, just kidding. But seriously. Alright, now that I got the measurements, it's time to put it to the boards. Measure, mark, and cut your boards. Once I got them all cut, I started sanding them down. So just a little something to laugh at, I sanded this entire board front and back and found out after that it wasn't even one of my pieces for the bookshelf. I sanded the boards with 220 grit sandpaper because these 1xs were already really smooth. So I sanded, and sanded, and sanded for what felt like hours.
5 hours later.
Now that I'm finished sanding, I think, I'm going to clean off the boards and get them ready to start assembling the bookshelf. To temporarily hold the boards together, I used a nail gun. Now before I go any further, I need to test fit this piece to make sure that it actually fits in between the two walls. And it looks like it fits. Time to go assemble the rest of the bookshelf. I ripped this 1x6 in half to use as a mounting place on the bookshelf and to help the bookshelf stay square as well. Check to make sure everything is still square, and we're all good. Now that almost everything is assembled, it's time to pre-drill my holes and install my 2.5-inch deck screws. Now I can install the last shelf. And after that, I only thought I was finished sanding. I sanded the whole bookshelf again. To cover up the screw holes and make a cleaner look, I used some Minwax wood filler. Now while the wood filler is drying, I'll go and sand the computer desk with 220 grit sandpaper, vacuum it, wipe it down with a damp cloth, and then put some poly on it. The poly that I'm using today is Minwax One Coat Polyurethane. While the poly is drying, I sanded the wood filler spots and had to get the bookshelf inside because another storm was coming. Now this bookshelf fit pretty snug on the wall, so it was interesting getting it into place because the windowsill stuck out just a little, giving me a little bit of a challenge. But it's nothing I can't handle, even if I have to mess up my new wall just a little. Thankfully, I just scraped it a little bit, an easy fix with some paint. Now we gotta make sure that we level the bookshelf and then again mark your studs so you know where to put the screws into the boards. For the bookshelf, I'm also using Minwax One Coat Poly. I originally was going to paint it white, but I'm glad I went with this instead. I didn't like how you could see the screw holes, so I put wood filler in these holes as well to give it, again, a cleaner look. Alright, now that the bookshelf and desk are dry, I can start getting everything set up. But first, let's do a recap of what it looked like before and after. This project was a lot of fun, and my wife and I are actually getting good use out of our office now. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Also, if you want to see more videos like this in the future, be sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification. And remember, everything used in this video is linked in the description below, so go check that out. And thanks again for watching another episode of Average Joe's DIY.